My name is Sophie, and I'm an outdoor educator at the Canadian Ecology Centre. Welcome to the forests of the Samuel de Champlain Provincial Park. Today we have a special guest who I'm very excited about. His name is Dan, and he's going to be talking to us and showing us wildflowers in winter.
Hello, I'm Dan. Thank you, Sophie, for that kind intro, and thank you to the people watching for joining me today. Today, we're going to be talking about and looking for wildflowers in winter. And you might be thinking, Dan, it's winter, there's not going to be any wildflowers. They come out in the spring and fall, and they're gone in the winter. But have you ever wondered what happens to those wildflowers in the winter? Well, today we're going to see if we can find out. When a plant develops a flower, that flower is to attract pollinators. And a pollinator can be an insect like a bee or a butterfly, or it could be a bird like a hummingbird. Really anything that travels between flowers can act as a pollinator. They carry pollen from one flower and bring it to the next, and this passing of pollen helps to develop the seeds. These seeds are what we're going to find, learn about, and responsibly collect today. Here we've found a wildflower plant in the winter, and we can see that its flowers have now turned into seeds. A closer look, we can see the white fluff of these seeds help it catch the wind and be dispersed to new areas where it can grow. This plant, the way that the flowers are clustered at the top of the plant, I think that it's an aster. By looking at my guidebook and seeing asters, going to that page, we can see that the asters in the fall have bright purple flowers with yellow on the inside where the seeds are formed. This is a New England aster, but I think that this smaller type of aster may be a lance-leafed aster. So now that we've identified this plant, maybe we could collect some of its seeds to grow in the future. So, before we collect our seeds, we want to acknowledge that we're not the only living being that could use this plant. We can see that there's also a small trail here where a mouse has walked by and possibly eaten some of these seeds on its journey. So we want to acknowledge that we're not the only ones that can use these seeds. There are many things, and even the plant itself. The seeds are important to sustain the population. As we look around, we can see that around here there's quite a few of these similar asters. So I feel alright collecting a couple of the seeds to grow in the future. I use a sealable tea bag that allows the moisture and air to flow around the seeds so that it doesn't go bad in storage. So I'll collect just a small pinch of seeds. That's maybe 10 seeds. And I'll put them in my bag and seal it up. And then, using a marker in the back of the book, I'll just write aster. Just quickly write what type of plant that you think that it is so that you'll remember when you're growing it. Here we found another wildflower in the winter. This plant is a goldenrod. So in the fall, using our guidebook, we can see that the goldenrod, like its name suggests, has beautiful golden yellow flowers. Now that those flowers have been pollinated, they've transformed and there are seeds. We can see that a lot of the seeds have already blown away. Similar to the aster plant, goldenrod will create its seeds with small fibers that help it disperse to new areas. We can see that these seeds are smaller than the asters. Here we found a goldenrod that was more protected from the wind and has retained a lot of its seeds. So this goldenrod, we can collect some of its seeds to grow in the future. So coming in, we can see that this area of the plant was protected by this snow, and there are lots of white fuzzy seeds. So we'll just take maybe a couple of small pinches. Each pinch you probably get around 10 seeds or so. They're quite small, and we'll put them into our sealable tea bag, which I've already labeled goldenrod. Now that we've identified that this is a rose bush and we've seen the fruit that contains the seeds, the rose hip, we might be tempted to collect that to grow it in our own garden. But looking around at the shrub, we see that this is the only rose hip here. So knowing that, we have to make the decision to leave it here so that it can benefit the wildlife, and also so that it has a chance to drop and to grow new rose plants. When you encounter a new plant and you're not sure what it is, you can start by asking a question like, who are you? And the plant isn't going to respond in a verbal way, but you can use your eyes to look and see what the plant is telling you with its structures. Like we can see this plant has a lot of spikes. It's very spiky. And it's also has a woody stem, unlike the other plants that we've looked at so far. It's tall. So we could say this plant is probably a shrub. And then if we look close, we can look at this structure is a rose hip. So we know that this is a rose bush, and that used to be a rose flower that is now transformed and contains the seeds. Now that we've identified that this is a rose bush and we've seen the fruit that contains the seeds, the rose hip, we might be tempted to collect that to grow it in our own garden. But looking around at the shrub, we see that this is the only rose hip here. So knowing that, we have to make the decision to leave it here so that it can benefit the wildlife, and also so that it has a chance to drop and to grow new rose plants. Thank you for joining us outside today, collecting seeds and learning more about wildflowers in winter. You might be wondering, what's the point of collecting these seeds? What can you do with them? And we're going to go inside and show you the way to germinate wild seeds. Now that we've collected our seeds and we've brought them home, we want to try and grow them. So seeds that mature in the fall with these plants require a cold, moist stratification. And stratification just means a process that needs to be done so that the seeds will germinate and start to grow. So to do this, we take some paper towel and wet it and squeeze out the extra moisture, and you use a Ziploc bag, and then the seeds that we've collected. So we can just take some of our aster seeds and dump them onto our moistened paper towel. Make sure that you've got them all out of your bag. And then just give each of them a little bit of space. And then just give it a little fold. And then it can just go right into the bag. And then you seal it up so that it'll keep the moisture in. So that's the moist part of cold moist stratification. And then for the cold part, we just put it in the fridge for 6 weeks. So we'll put today's date on so that we know. So then we know in 6 weeks from now, we can take those out of the fridge, put them in a pot with some potting soil, and they'll start to grow. And once the roots are developed, we can move them to our garden outside. So you might be wondering why this is necessary for these seeds. But if you think about what happens in nature, the seeds develop in the fall and fall to the ground, and they spend winter underneath the snow. Whenever the spring comes, they're subjected to multiple freezes and thaws, and the ground is moistened by the snow melting. This will start the germination process naturally. So what we're doing with this process, with the Ziploc bags and moistened paper towel into the fridge, is emulating what would happen naturally. Now that we have our seeds in moistened paper towels and Ziploc bags that are labeled with the species and the date, we can move on to the next step and put them in the fridge where they will be cold for 6 weeks, and then they'll be ready to germinate. There you go. Don't forget about them in there. Thank you for joining me today as we went out, found some wildflowers in the winter, and responsibly collected their seeds. And we're learning how to germinate them. I encourage you to go out and collect some seeds, learn to germinate them, and start your own small native plant garden. Native plant gardens are great for attracting new insects and birds to your yard, providing them with food.